Right, and in focus is SCO and regional stability. SCO and regional stability. And to discuss this, we have with us Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar, former senior diplomat, and Professor Harshvardhan Pant is Distinguished Fellow at ORF. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. We'll start with you, Ambassador Sajanhar. Let's try and put into context this meeting, because it's happening at a time when, post-COVID or in the COVID situation, China seems to be having some sort of an aggressive foreign policy that may not be going down too well. And what do you think, what kind of an impact will it have on SCO?
Well, you see, as far as Mark, SCO is concerned, it is an organization that is really dominated by China. You know, it started in 1996 as Shanghai 5 and then converted into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in 2001 with the inclusion of Uzbekistan. So it started with 6 original members, Russia, China, and the 4 Central Asian countries. And in 2017, India and Pakistan also joined. So there are 8 members, and China really dominates, has been dominating, till India has come, and I think India has given some balance to this organization. So China has been aggressive and assertive. We've seen it in the South China Sea. We have seen it against India. But also, if you were to look at the other member countries of the SCO, if it is Russia, then China has been, there have been a number of reports in the social media and otherwise, where they've been objecting to this 160th anniversary celebrations of accession of Vladivostok to Russia, because China has continued to harbor this feeling that this far east region of Russia really belongs to China, and it is being occupied, so to say, illegally by Russia. In Tajikistan, China has said that much of the Pamirs belongs to it because it has traditionally and historically, the same rationale that it used for the South China Sea. It says that Pamirs belongs to it because historically it was a part of China. In Kazakhstan also, there were reports recently which suggested that Kazakhstan once used to be a part of China, and Kazakhstan wants to revert back to China. Now, this has not gone down well. Of course, as far as the Uyghur issue is concerned in Xinjiang, amongst the people in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, both of them share borders, and both of them have people of Kazakh and Kyrgyz. They are also in the Xinjiang region, and they have also been put in these concentration camps. So these people have also been demonstrating and protesting against what China has been doing there. So notwithstanding the fact that China has this problem, but as far as COVID time is concerned, China has been able to go in and put in a lot of assistance and support. For instance, in Uzbekistan, it has provided, let's say, about $300 million worth of assistance and aid. Similarly, Kazakhstan and Tajikistan, they own more than 50% of their debt to China. So China has levers by which it can control these countries. So while there is this disaffection against China, but none of the countries is really willing to say anything. And last word I'll say about Russia, because Russia also has its problems. It has its wariness, because when it sees that China is entering into Central Asia in such a big way, not only in the economic field, but also in military and security terms, it has established a base in Tajikistan. But Russia is not able to say anything because it wants to partner with China against its arch enemy United States, because it wants United States out of Central Asia, and it has no other way to go except to be friends with China.
Right, that's quite fascinating what you've said. But Professor Harshpant, put this into context for us from the point of view of regional stability. I mean, the idea of regional stability, if we take the point of what our External Affairs Minister said just a few days ago, he said that, peace and tranquility on the border cannot be separated from development and these kind of things. So we need to understand that these things have to go together. But if China is being aggressive about border issues and at the same time wanting to talk development, these things don't go together.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, what the SCO platform gives India is another opportunity to underscore one of the fundamental principles that I think India has been underscoring ever since the crisis with China broke out in May. And the fundamental argument there is that, look, unless there is stability on the border, there is strategic stability in the relationship, it makes no sense to talk of expanding trade or economic prosperity or a win-win situation, as Chinese are often prone to talk about. And similarly, when you're looking at SCO, when you're looking at the Central Asian republics, when you're looking at countries like which are bordering Afghanistan, I think that the idea is that, look, here is China, which has often talked about this principle of containing extremism and terrorism, yet continues to support Pakistan. Pakistan is the epicenter of global terrorism, which infects not only India but also Afghanistan and also the entire South Central Asian region. So clearly, when it comes to basic principles of interstate relations, China today emerges as an outlier, as a country that is willing to change or alter status quo unilaterally. And that's a principle I think that India will reinforce once again when it sits at the SCO, where it won't be talking bilaterally about its relations with China, but I think it will be talking about fundamentally these principles that one has to adhere to if one wants to be a responsible global stakeholder. So every platform that is available to India should underscore this reality and therefore put China under pressure. So while many of the Central Asian republics, as Ambassador was talking about earlier, do not have adequate capital or diplomatic heft to take on China because they are so dominated economically by China, I think when it comes to some of the fundamental laws of interstate relations, fundamental principles, those need to be underscored. And I think India will be doing that even as it takes its bilateral conversation with China forward.
Ambassador Sajanhar, then the role of India as a responsible member of the world community and also as a development, as a promoter of development in many of these countries, especially let's take even, amongst the observer countries, India is playing a significant role in Afghanistan. India is has a good relationship with Iran. India is developing a stronger relationship with Mongolia. India has, with many of the other countries who are dialogue partners, India is playing significant roles. I mean, we have Sri Lanka there, we have some of the Nepal is also one of those countries. So let's try and understand, India has a stake here. India is playing its role as a responsible nation in the world and is also contributing to development and progress and stability as a result of that.
No, absolutely, you're very right, Mark. India has good relations with the Central Asian countries, and I would say that one of the biggest advantages in my view, and why when we were talking about whether India should be acceding to SCO or not, I was always of the firm view that India should be a part there because India has a stake in this region and India has a position which needs to be articulated. And India has excellent relations with Central Asian countries. But because we do not get an opportunity to meet them and interact with them, so this is an excellent forum, and as you've seen, you said yourself, that our External Affairs Minister met the Foreign Minister of Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. I'm sure he'll be meeting also the Foreign Ministers of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan also tomorrow. So, and our Defense Minister also, when he went there, he met the ministers, his counterparts from Tajikistan, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. So I think that gives us a very good entree and, to expand our relations with those countries. Secondly, Afghanistan is a very important issue and Afghanistan is extremely important for us. We have invested, of course, more than $3 billion in terms of infrastructure, in terms of capacity and human resource development and so on and so forth. But you have seen that many of the more recent initiatives that have been taken, whether it is the US initiative, the Qatar agreement that was signed on February 29th, or what Moscow is doing or what China is doing with Pakistan and the others. India is not really a part of that except for the one that has been initiated by Uzbekistan. India is a part of that. So presence of India here on this forum where there is a contact group on Afghanistan that has been recently reactivated. I think that's very important because India can say its part, and India can sort of, again push for a final solution, peace and reconciliation agreement with, which is controlled by by the Afghan government and by the Afghan people. So I think this is very important as far as India is concerned. We'll also be talking about terrorism. I'm sure the External Affairs Minister will be talking about how terrorism is a huge scourge as far as our region is concerned. Now, Mark, you mentioned about all these countries, Iran and Sri Lanka and Mongolia. We have, and Central Asia, we have good relations with them. But we also need to recognize that China has relations with them which are much stronger economically and militarily. We've been reading about Iran, $400 billion of agreement over the next 25 years, defense agreement, and they will be able to take this port of
Yes,
Just,
indeed.
and all those sort of things. So the point I'm making is that India has its stake. At a bilateral level, we can advance our partnership and our collaboration with them. But on the forum as such, as far as the SCO forum is concerned, there are certain limitations.
Okay, there are certain limitations, but Professor Harshpant, let's try and understand the role of Russia now, because a lot of these countries are basically Russian-speaking countries. They are ex-Soviet countries, and as a result of that, Russia probably feels that there is a cultural affinity of some kind, and there is the whole idea of SCO is not, it's not the great game for Central Asia. It is a Eurasian project in a sense because of the role that Russia plays, and it connects to Europe through Russia. So how would you look at, the role of Russia?
Well, Russia had been instrumental in giving shape to SCO, as we were discussing earlier. But I think it took its role in the region for some time to, it took that role for granted. Now I think it is recognizing the limits of its own engagement in the region at a time when China is emerging as one of the most significant actors in Central Asia. If you look at the bilateral relationship that Central Asian republics have with China, they surpass in economic terms, in connectivity imaginations, they surpass what Russia can afford, what Russia can give to this region, apart from the old historical legacy issues. So there is a sense that Russia is losing out, and therefore the role that Russia is playing is increasingly becoming more and more nuanced. It was at Russia's insistence that also India also came on board in SCO, and I think that was a very important reason there, that Russia also wanted to see some kind of a balancing on a platform which was getting overshadowed by China's presence. So I think what India's entry has done is to give it a little bit more balance. And therefore, when you look at the Sino-Indian, tensions these days, Russia has played a very nuanced role.
Absolutely.
Because Russia wants India also to help it in areas where it is weak, where it can, it is trying to reestablish itself, and it is also playing a very important balancing role between India and China. So Russia's role in Central Asia, of course, is going to be pivotal, but Russia also recognizes the limits of that. And therefore, it is important for India to work with Russia in this context, because I think it opens up a window of opportunity vis-a-vis China, where China is the dominant player, and that dominance can only be broken if you have countries like India and Russia perhaps working together.
True. Ambassador Sajjanhar, one of the key roles, or one of the focus areas of SCO has been, the fight against terrorism and extremism. And clearly here, India has an important voice and an important role to play. But the presence of Pakistan in the SCO itself raises a question about how are we fighting terrorism when the epicenter of terrorism is right in the middle of this SCO, and we understand that the region itself has been a victim of terrorism. We know that in that whole area of Afghanistan, Pakistan, that Af-Pak region, in that context, and also the way it has spread extremism from those areas. So how does the SCO deal with this?
You see, the formulation as far as the SCO charter is concerned is they mention separatism, extremism and terrorism.
Yes.
And this is basically, this is a formulation that was introduced by China, basically to ensure that its own restive Uyghur population in Xinjiang, that this is protected and there are no attacks. You know, there are terrorist organizations like ATIM, East Turkestan Islamic Movement. So they are the ones who have been trying to attack and infiltrate into Xinjiang from the western borders of that state. So basically, when the original charter was made, that is what it is. It basically doesn't really look at any other type of terrorism, because we know that as far as Pakistan is concerned, it says not only that we also are a victim of terror, and its supporters like China, because you know, when Russia wanted India to become a part of SCO, then China definitely wanted Pakistan also to come there, because to try to give it some sort of a balance. And we must also recognize that China stood in as an obstacle to India's membership of the SCO all the way from 2009 to 2014, because it said we need to sort of, you know, first of all consolidate ourselves and then only we will think of expansion. So, I mean, that is history, that is past. But the point is that SCO, under its charter, doesn't really look at the terrorism emanating from Pakistan as such, because Pakistan is able to sort of, you know, put forward the point that we also are victims of terror. There are so many terror groups operating against our own agencies. So it is in the discussions that take place in a much more ideological setting, and not in terms of specificities as to where is terror emanating from and so on and so forth. But I think for us the most important element in this would be to see how peace and security and economic development can be brought to Afghanistan, because that is very important, and how India can continue to maintain a role as far as developments in Afghanistan are concerned.
Fine. Peace, security and development, Professor Harsh Pant, but you know, the current standoff in eastern Ladakh and the aggressive posturing of China, this when, you know, because of the fact that our defense minister has just been there and he has met the Chinese defense minister, and you know, India didn't budge, India didn't blink, and once again the RIC meeting is to take place. Of course, Russia will also be there, but you know, regional stability is a question here. Regional stability is an issue, and India, I'm sure, needs to highlight these concerns. And you know, even if the external affairs minister does meet his Chinese counterpart, I'm sure that it will continue to be you know, the same message given out very clearly. So, because even currently, you know, the brigadier level talks took place today again, and they were inconclusive. So where do you see, you know, how do you see this playing out?
Well, this is, I think, one of the challenges, both in terms of Sino-Indian bilateral relations as well as regional multilateralism. Because, you know, for long we have lived with this facade of, you know, that we can have it all together, that we can have this bilateral relationship that will be at odds with each other, with the and as well as we can have these platforms which can say something, which can pronounce basic principles but do not actually operationalize those principles. And I think India has increasingly been making this point that dissonance is no longer acceptable. Countries, especially major powers, not only need to recognize what the legitimate interests of other powers are, they also need to recognize the red lines, and therefore regional stability, prosperity cannot be disassociated from bilateral stability. And what is happening in the Sino-Indian context, and I think this will be a point that will be made not as a bilateral matter but as a matter of principle, that if you want major powers to respect some of those fundamental principles, then it is very important for them to enshrine those principles in the day-to-day conduct of their foreign policy. So China cannot continue to talk about regional stability when it is the most important element in dismantling that regional stability by going against other countries' interests, by unilaterally challenging the status quo and changing the status quo on the ground. And I think that's a fundamental issue that India has highlighted in the past, and my sense is that the foreign minister would be again highlighting that problem, both multilaterally as well as in its bilateral dealings, where India will continue not to budge from its stance that the situation has to go to status quo ante as it existed in April on the border. So I think that problem remains where it is. It's very unlikely that one meeting is going to resolve this problem, and India and China both are at this point in a situation which seems irreconcilable. But my sense is that if this meeting is productive, then perhaps we can look at a series of other engagements that can resolve this problem. But at the moment, the trust deficit is very, very high, and anything that the Chinese say, it will be very difficult for India to trust them unless the Chinese show that they are willing to operationalize that in ground realities on the ground along the LAC.
But what would you see as encouraging signs then, Ambassador Sajjanhar? The fact that dialogue is continuing, dialogue both at the military level and at the diplomatic level and even at the political level, because this is the political level dialogue that's taken place, between the defense minister and the foreign minister as well. And the rest, what's left now is just at the leadership level. So I mean, the dialogue is taking place.
No, absolutely, you're very right, Mark, and we've seen that the dialogue at the military level, whether it's at the Corps Commander, it was able to help us some way. We agreed on 5th of June to disengage, but then we saw what happened on the 15th of June as far as Galwan is concerned. When we had raised the level, NSA spoke to his counterpart, Wang Yi, who is the special representative, on the 5th of July. And after that also we have not really seen much progress, because after that China came and occupied the Finger 4 to 8 area and also the Depsang Plains. So that sort of dialogue has also not really helped at the diplomatic level. So as you said very rightly, at the political level, now this dialogue will be held, and I think again the message will go out very clearly. But I feel that right now when the dialogue takes place, India will be speaking from a position of strength, because we have occupied certain heights on the southern bank of the Pangong Lake. Before that, when we were talking, it was just that we were asking them to restore status quo ante. We had no cards in our hands. Today we have some cards in our hand which we can sort of use to bargain and sort of come to some sort of a mutually acceptable agreement. And I think what the two ministers, when the two ministers meet, let me also say one thing, like in all the other multilateral, plurilateral fora, bilateral issues are out of bounds as far as these meetings are concerned. And I'm very happy that this is so, because we cannot give, we do not give any third country right to mediate. We do not give the United Nations to get involved in our bilateral issues with any of the country. We cannot give an organization dominated by a country like China to get involved in any proactive manner. So what SCO does really is provide us with a possibility that on the sidelines we are able to have meetings with our counterparts, like Mr. Rajnath Singh had with his counterpart, what Dr. Jaishankar will have with his counterpart here. So we try to take the relationship forward on that, try to see if there are some possibilities. And I think what the two ministers will also do is work on the SCO summit which takes place in Russia next month. And there both Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping, President Xi Jinping, are going to be there and set up a meeting between them, because if we have to sort of ensure that there is a peaceful resolution. But in the meantime also, I think as Harsh said, there is trust is totally absent. China will definitely try to do something, get some more advantage, and we need to be wary of that.
Okay, we leave it there. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us here on Newsnight and helping us understand the current situation, putting into context regional stability and the SCO.